In 1964, there was a rash of UFO sightings that occurred in the United States. That year, for the first few months of the year, UFO sightings were down, and there weren't many reports of strange crafts in the sky. However, as spring and summer rolled around, there would be an explosion of sightings. In addition to this, unlike many other UFO flaps, in many of the sightings, the UFOs would hover to the ground, land, and sometimes a close encounter of the third kind would occur. In today's episode, we will examine a case that occurred from the state of New Mexico in 1964. The incident garnered massive media attention and was investigated by Project Blue Book and has never been debunked. This case has become to be known as the Lonnie Zamora incident. On April 24, 1964, around 5:45 p.m., New Mexico police officer Lonnie Zamora was out on patrol when he would spot someone speeding. Lonnie began to pursue the individual chasing him, eventually going out to the remote desert in Socorro. As Lonnie was in pursuit, he would suddenly hear a roar and see a blue flame to the southwest, around half a mile away. At this point, Lonnie stopped his pursuit of the speeding car and began heading toward the direction of the explosion. He would soon turn down a dirt road, and believing it might have been a dynamite shack that exploded, he radioed headquarters of the event. However, as he got closer, he would be confused at what he was looking at. Around 150 yards away, he would spot a white object, which he believed was a white car turned over. Zamora kept approaching the object and climbed to the top of a mesa. He then got out of his vehicle and would be stunned to see a silver, egg-shaped shiny craft with 4 landing legs. Just outside there appeared to be 2 small humanoids. The beings wore white overalls, were around 4 feet tall, and had no facial features. Lonnie would head back to the car and try and radio again, but just got static. As he turned around, the small humanoids were gone. The craft began to ascend, and a blue flame shot out the bottom. Lonnie would then run behind the car and watch as the craft hovered into the sky. It remained there for a few minutes, hovering silently, and then quickly flew away. A stunned Lonnie would then question to himself what he actually saw. After a short time, with the radio working again, he contacted his good friend Sergeant Sam Chavez of the New Mexico State Police and asked him to come quickly. Chavez would later recall when he arrived, the two would go inspect the scene. There were large indentations in the ground, around 9 inches deep, 8 inches long, and 9 inches wide. The 2 policemen would note there were no human footprints around anywhere, yet there were some circle indentations. Soon the U.S. Army would send Captain Richard T. Holder to investigate. Holder noticed the unusual marks in the sand and a bush burned to a crisp on only one side. He would later state, "Everything we saw seemed to support the story that Officer Zamora recounted. Nothing gave me the slightest hint that he did this as a hoax or cooked it up for fame or fortune." Project Blue Book would investigate the incident as well, and they noticed the burn marks and the strange scene. They were also quite impressed with Zamora and his story. Project Blue Book was the U.S. Air Force's official inquiry into the UFOs, and from 1952 to 1969, they investigated over 12,000 UFO cases. Of the 12,000 they investigated, only 700 were documented as unexplained. The Zamora incident is one of those cases. J. Allen Hynek, a very well-known astronomer and UFO researcher, would examine the site too, at the request of the U.S. Air Force. He would state he believed Zamora and would note the physical evidence at the scene indicated something probably happened there. As mentioned, this case got tons of press and attention. It eventually got so bad for Zamora that he stopped fielding interview requests from the press and ufologists. Zamora would later work as a gas station attendant and would finally pass away in 2009. Over the years, there's been a number of theories on what happened. Skeptics have proposed that the entire incident was faked by local college students. Still, this doesn't explain the noise and humanoid that Zamora witnessed. Another explanation that has been put forth is that Zamora saw some type of mirage. This as well suffers from flaws, as it doesn't explain the noise Zamora heard. One explanation that this was a top secret military craft. This explanation seems plausible, but doesn't really explain the humanoids being so small and also devoid of facial features. In addition, if it was two humans walking around, why were there no footprints found at the scene? It is important to point out too that Zamora and Sam Chavez were trained to handle crime scenes and would know how not to disturb the site. The final theory, and probably most likely, was the craft was either extraterrestrial or perhaps from another dimension. The case shares many similarities with other UFO cases. This includes the silver-shaped craft and also the important detail the beings wore overalls or something similar. We see this type of clothing in many other cases, some of which we have covered on this channel. Still, the most interesting aspect of this case probably is the description of the beings. The beings seemed to resemble classic gray aliens at first, but of course had no facial features, or perhaps they were very small. The fact that these entities were faceless is interesting, but we should point out cases of faceless aliens are not unheard of. That same year, in the summer of 1964, an older woman in Lancashire, England, saw a bright orange spear silently explode outside her residence. Later that night, the woman went to bed, and an almost faceless entity appeared in the bedroom. She estimated it to be around 5 feet tall. All this said, this case continues to be examined today. Interestingly, the site of the incident has been modernized with walkways to make it more accessible for tourists. However, the site is actually a quarter of a mile from where the incident actually occurred. This is due to reports of radiation present at the original site. It's not known if this is true, but perhaps there might be some element of truth to the rumor.